What's up, ladies and gentlemen, it's your boy Xehther here, back at it again with part 2 for What If Deku Was Broly's Reincarnation. Now remember guys, if you guys want to see the rest of this story, it's already up on the channel for members only, so if you want that, you know what to do. That said, enjoy!
Hey Ross, sauce it up!
Okay, so jumping back into our story, pretty much where we left off, we then pick up with 2 very useful days of UA. I mean, nothing really happens, but all of the students begin to essentially get acquainted with themselves and end up finding their own friend groups. Eventually though, we do end up having the very special and enticing event that I'm pretty sure a lot of you guys were waiting for in part 1, which is just the heroes versus villains event. Now obviously All Might bursts through the door like a normal person, right? And he then proceeds to just start talking to the class and telling them about what it's like to be a hero and walking them through his own personal journey. He then goes on to pretty much take his moment to shine, smiles, and just reveals the costumes in the walls. Everybody goes crazy, and after this he tells them that to be heroes, you gotta look like heroes. So they gotta put them on and meet him outside. Once they do so, he ends up pretty much giving them the lottery tickets, things like that, and they end up pretty much each picking their own little slots and finding out who's gonna be fighting against who. Bakugo would pretty much be praying to end up fighting against Deku because that's what he wants. He wants to show everybody that he's stronger than Deku. By using All Might's quirk, he wants to prove that he's better than him, right? And from here, that's exactly what would end up happening. I mean, Deku would end up getting teamed up with Uraraka, and Bakugo would still be teamed up with Ida. This is something that still ends up happening just like it would in the original, and what would end up happening here is basically Deku would be with Uraraka, and Bakugo would be being a jerk, honestly. He would just be sitting there and like looking at Deku and just giving him a death stare and kind of like bumping into him and be like, "You're up second place," like being extremely rude to Deku. And Uraraka would wonder why he lets that slide, like why he just lets him do that. Deku would say that once upon a time they were actually best friends when they were kids, and that as soon as Bakugo unlocked his quirk, he became pretty arrogant and thought that he was better than everybody else, saying that Bakugo just developed a god complex and that was really all there was to it. There was nothing else, nothing less. But Uraraka would understand and say, "So, you guys are childhood rivals then? I guess I won't get in your way, but just let me know if you need anything, okay?" And she gives him a really bright smile that Izuku would look at and just feel like just happy. Like he sees her smile and he's like, he just feels like his heart just kind of like melts. Like he just feels as if like that cold that Bakugo just put him through just like went away completely. And he looks at Uraraka and he smiles back and he's like, "Yeah." From here, they both end up pretty much going towards the direction of the building, and as soon as All Might blows the whistle, all of them end up pretty much walking in, and Bakugo looks at Ida and goes, "Hey, Four Eyes, you better make sure you take care of the bomb, okay?" And Ida's like, "How dare you speak to your fellow student?" But Bakugo would just leave the room, and Ida would say, like that. As Bakugo goes down the building and he's shooting explosions, making his way towards Deku as fast as possible, right? Izuku, hearing the explosions coming very close and sensing Bakugo's ki get closer and closer, would look to Uraraka and tell her that for now, all he wants her to do is go outside and to just trust him. From here, Uraraka just nods and she's like, "Well, I would go to the bomb room, but if you say so." And Izuku just looks at Uraraka and he's like, "Trust me, I got this." From here, she does so, and Izuku would just be waiting by the corner as Bakugo throws an explosion and comes right into the same, the same walkway that Izuku's in. When Bakugo's there, he looks around and he's like, "Deku, come out wherever you are," right? And Deku comes in from the corner and just punches Bakugo straight in the jaw, sending him crashing into the wall. He gets up and he's like, "We're playing with sucker punches, huh?" And so he throws a huge explosion at Deku, and Deku jumps back, dodging it. From here, you know, he begins getting into his fighting position, and him and Bakugo begin swapping hands. You know, they're like actually fighting, they're brawling. This is like a Dragon Ball style fight where both of them are just fighting as fast and strong as they can. They're landing blows, but the one that's actually having the upper hand at this current moment is Bakugo. He's landing more and more blows on Izuku, and he's being able to use his explosions to accelerate his movements and move in a way that Izuku's just not used to. His fighting style is so damn unorthodox that he was not prepared for this, and so it would begin catching him off guard, but slowly but surely, Izuku would begin to trace Bakugo's movements, I guess you could say, and like understand them. He's learning as he fights, so we would finally be able to dodge and counterattack more and more, and eventually Bakugo would kick Izuku back, sending an explosion to give them enough distance, and then saying it's ready as he pulls the pin off one of his gauntlets, and it just shoots a massive explosion into the building, which actually would rattle everything, and Ida would be up on top of the bomb room just wondering like what's going on down there, right? Uraraka's watching the building shake, and Izuku, after being hit with that explosion, would be sent back flying, right? Like after this, he felt pain, he felt that. Like this is not just some normal explosion that it's like, oh, he could walk right through it. No, Izuku felt that. He's flesh and bone, he's a man. Just because he's buff, just because he's powerful doesn't mean he doesn't feel pain. And that's how I feel when I play basketball, because, you know, people think just because I'm tall, like I don't have feelings. Like I don't feel pain when they shove into me with their elbows, and just because they're like two inches shorter than me, they think that's cool. I'm sorry guys, I needed to vent somewhere. But anyways, Izuku basically gets enraged, right? Like his eyes change from their normal state to his wrathful form, and Izuku is like his shirt is ripped, like it's gone. And he just looks at, you know, Bakugo, and he's like, no more, Bakugo. He rips his shirt off and his eyes are just glowing, and he's like, no more. He walks straight through the explosion, and there's like no injuries on his body. It was just his clothes in tatters, and he's enraged, and his muscles buffed up way more. And Bakugo's looking at Deku, and he's like, what? But from here, he kind of has like a little bit of a flashback, like those Vietnam flashbacks. Like he's terrified, right? And Bakugo looks at Deku, and Deku's not playing. Like, I'm sorry, Bakugo, but you're about to get beat. And that's exactly what happens. Deku rushes in and grabs Bakugo by the throat and smashes his face onto the wall and begins dragging his face across the entire wall, like building thing. From here, Deku then throws him into another room, and Bakugo would finally activate like full cowling, like as max as he possibly can, trying to get up and dodge. But Bakugo grabs him by the leg, not letting him explode away. And when Bakugo tries to use an explosion in Deku's face, it just pisses him off more. So he gets even stronger, and he grips Bakugo's leg, pretty much breaking it, and then smashing him into the ground, and then throwing him outside of the building entirely. At this point, All Might is like, stop the battle, right? Knowing that his successor is about to get his ass whooped, right? And Deku just continues walking, like just menacingly. He flies over to Bakugo and goes to throw another punch right at his face, which would have severely damaged Bakugo, mind you. But All Might grabs his arm, and Deku looks at All Might with like this rage in his eyes, and he's like, he just can't control himself. He sees blur at this point. So he grabs All Might by the head, and he like headbutts him, right? And from here, he then pushes All Might back, and All Might is like, I don't want to have to do this, Izuku, but you're forcing my hand. And he then punches Izuku straight in the face. And Izuku turns his head right back to face All Might, and he's like, funny. He spits on the ground, and then he punches All Might straight through two buildings. As you know, Ida is already aware that the test was off, so he makes it down to the first room, and Bakugo just sitting there with a broken leg, a couple of crushed ribs because he was smashed onto the ground and just bleeding out. And Izuku at this current moment is literally fighting All Might. Like, they're all watching as Izuku is just like pummeling All Might, and like he is literally going at him. He's fighting and fighting and fighting, and his hair would begin to stand on edge slightly. Like All Might can feel that the rage that Deku is feeling is just rising and rising and rising. And Izuku is a punch, and All Might is feeling it at this point. Like he's not playing no more. He's 100% going out, but Izuku is just like so unbelievably strong that All Might is getting ragdolled. This has never happened to him, and All Might is getting absolutely beat on until Uraraka comes rushing in, and she's like, Izuku, you know what I mean? And Izuku, hearing her voice, like kind of sees reason, and his vision like kind of comes back, and he sees All Might, and he sees that he was about to punch him again, and then he stops, and he just like walks like takes a couple of steps back, and he's like, I didn't mean to. And All Might is just sitting there like in a bloody pulp, and Uraraka looks at him, and Izuku just looks at Uraraka, and she rushes in, and instead of like feeling fear like the last time, she gives him the biggest hug, and she's like, thought I lost you, big guy. And Izuku, like, he's sitting there with his muscles bulged and like raised, like that vein in his head slowly begins to dissipate. And you know, he like hugs Uraraka back, and he's like, what happened? And she's like, well, you lost it. I heard Bakugo shot an explosion at you, and from there you got so angry, I guess you must have blacked out. Izuku looks at her and he's like, yeah, I guess I must have. Looks like I need to have more control over my power next time. And you know, he then looks at All Might and he just like helps him up, and he puts him on his back, and he takes him to Recovery Girl. From there, he pretty much ends up waiting in the office, just like sitting there with his like legs and just like with his hands in like a ball and like under his chin, and he's like bouncing his knee up and down, like very, very clearly like worried about All Might. But eventually, obviously, Recovery Girl comes out, and she's like, kid, you gave us quite a scare there. You banged up All Might pretty bad. I honestly haven't seen him in this bad of shape for years now. And Izuku's like, he'll be okay, right? And she's like, yeah, hell, the old guy will be fine. You really did a number on him, kid. And then All Might just goes, can I speak to the kid? And Izuku walks in without Uraraka, and Recovery Girl is in there. And you know, he pretty much ends up telling Izuku, asking him what that power was, that like he has never in his life seen power anywhere near that. Like his power was getting stronger and stronger by the second. It almost seemed like it was endless. And Izuku looks at All Might and he's like, I'm sorry, All Might. I need to learn to control my power still. I just have so much of it that sometimes it can overwhelm me. And even since 6th grade, an incident like this happened once again. I lost it. When my anger gets the best of me, something like this happens. I am sorry. He bows down to All Might, and All Might tells him not to be ashamed of what just happened today, that this would have happened to anybody, and that he is an exceptional talent and not to let this weigh down on him. But Bakugo was over there with the students, pretty much telling them that, he's evil and all that stuff. But this time around, that strategy's not working. Like this time around, Bakugo tried to like make Izuku look out to be like a villain, but like everybody there is just kind of being like, you started it, Bakugo. Like, you think we didn't watch how you pulled an explosion that huge on Deku? You would have done that on any of us and we could have died. You were the first one who tried to kill him, so why was it so bad when he did it back? And people would like kind of realize that. Like some people started to believe Bakugo when he said it, like Hiroshima and stuff like that. But then Ida pointed out that he started it, and like Todoroki and Momo would even back him up. And from here, Bakugo was kind of put against a corner because it kind of was like brought to everyone's attention that it was his fault. Like it was nobody but his fault that any of this just happened. So Bakugo kind of just has to sit there, grit his teeth, and realize that he's in the wrong and he's not going to be coming out on top this time. So essentially what ends up happening is Bakugo's like, whatever, right? And he just has a couple of people that don't like Izuku now. And basically what ends up happening is they have normal days of school. Obviously the cafeteria incident would still end up happening, water break, and water break is like me saying I'm gonna take water. Oh my god. I'm not cutting this out. Oh my god. I forgot to drink water for a second. I'm not cutting this out. Yeah, much better. Oh wow. I almost died. Oh my god. Okay, anyways, no, I need a couple more seconds, guys. I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm sorry for if you guys like really were bothered by this, you could have just skipped it. But anyways, what ends up happening here is we end up pretty much getting the USJ incident pretty much roll around the corner. Now, obviously, everybody had to go and get their permission slip signed, just like you would in elementary school. And from here, we pretty much just have a very standard USJ incident, right? Ida tells everybody to get out of the bus. Aizawa tells them to pay attention to 13. 13 gives the world's most boring speech and most obvious speech in the world. And eventually Kurogiri appears in the center of the USJ. He appears in the center of the USJ, right? And when he does this, Kirishima would lunge in using his hardening quirk to try to pretty much take him out the second that they all realize that this was not a game, right? And, you know, they're doing their absolute best. They're trying very, very hard, mind you, to try to, you know, do something. But eventually what would end up happening here is we get this very, very strange situation, right? Because it's like Kurogiri and the villains are there and, you know, they're trying their absolute best to instill fear on the students, and the students gets teleported away. And, you know, when this is all happening, Izuku is kind of wary to even act, just due to the fact of what happened the last time that he fought back. So when he gets teleported towards the portion where the water is at with Mineta and Tsuyu, he was able to quickly fly out of the water and, you know, locate Mineta, and, you know, Asui was going towards him to save him, and she does so, and then from there they get on the boat. Right? Once there, Izuku just looks at them and he's like, don't worry guys, I'll take care of it. Tsuyu, I'm gonna throw you towards the mainland. You grab Mineta, land safely, and then go towards the rest of the students. She nods, she's like, ribbit. And from here, Izuku grabs them both and just throws Tsuyu with one arm back to the mainland, as, you know, he looks at the water and he's like, all right, guess it's showtime. As from here, he uses just a couple of ki blasts and he just flies up into the air and ki blast, ki blast, ki blast, ki blast into the water. Eventually, he realizes that that's not really enough, and so what ended up happening is he throws a punch down into the water so powerful that the air force would just like blow the water out of the area like a tsunami kind of, and all the villains would be trapped up in it, so they would be very injured, and all in one fell swoop would just be taken out instantly, right? And what ends up happening after this is Izuku goes over towards the direction of Aizawa, but when he sees that, he's like wary to even go help, because he's like, will I freak out again? Like, will these villains get the better of me? And he's like, not sure. So he goes down to where Uraraka's at, and he's like, you guys okay? And Uraraka's like, Izuku, what are you doing? I thought you'd be fighting over there. Izuku looks at her, he looks down, he's like, honestly, I think I'd be more of a burden if I was down there. And Uraraka's like, you wouldn't be a burden, Izuku. They need you. That rage isn't always a bad thing. With villains, it might be a good thing. She looks at Izuku and she's like, go, you have to act now. And Izuku just looks at her and he's like, you're right. And he like flies down there and he immediately shoots ki blasts at a bunch of villains and punch, kick. He just begins to ragdoll a bunch of villains alongside Aizawa, who was getting pretty much overwhelmed. Like at that moment that he arrived, he blows all the villains off of Aizawa, and eventually the Nomu would come rushing in at Deku, punching him square in the face, sending him flying. As Deku is in the crater, we see Bakugo flying in with his 100% full cowling as he's like, die! And he throws an explosion at the Nomu, and it's extremely powerful, mind you. And the Nomu like looks back at Bakugo and he like screeches, and it regenerates the head portion that got blown off a little bit. And from here, Bakugo gets grabbed by the Nomu and just slammed onto the ground. He's like, every time, you know, just thinking to himself, like, these big dudes always want to slam me and grab me by my head, right? But he spins mid-air with his explosions, and he like is able to make the the Nomu let go. He charges up like the max one for all percentage he can do, and he just shoots a full power explosion right at the head of the Nomu as he just screams, die! And the Nomu's head just blow. Like the explosion is so damn powerful and condensed right at the Nomu's head that it just exploded. And because there was just nothing left of it, the Nomu just falls to the ground and like pretty much dies. And Bakugo from here, he just looks at the boss villain and he's like, you're next. But before he could do anything, Kurogiri appears in front of Bakugo, opens a portal for Shigaraki, and they both leave out of the area before anything else could be done. And from here, Deku was just pretty much sat there looking at the back of Bakugo, as he just thinks to himself that he was actually able to handle that quite well. And from here, you know, Bakugo looks to him and he doesn't say a word, and Aizawa helps Deku up, and the cleanup crew happens just like usual. Eventually after this, we end up cutting into a 1 week break, which Deku would end up pretty much doing some more training, and this time around he would do weighted training, which would be very, very beneficial. And by weighted, I mean like on his body, to help him like do better, you know what I mean? But he quickly comes to realize that no matter how many weights he puts on, he just can't seem to even feel the effects, right? So he realizes that he might as well just do like tons of calisthenics, because the gym just doesn't work anymore, and so does weighted training. So he just does that, and we just pretty much get Deku doing his absolute best to try to train and get more stronger, but he just kind of can't. Like, the only way that he knows to get stronger is to kind of let his rage control him, but when he does that, he just can't. So what does Deku do instead of training? He meditates. And this would actually help Izuku out a lot because it's like meditation would calm his mind, his heart, and it would let him gain a little bit of control over his wrathful form to the point where he can slightly control it by the end of this 1 week, but nothing too beneficial to the point where he can snap into it and out of it, without having any repercussions, right? But eventually though, we do get the USJ event happening, and the person who does give the speech this time around would still be Izuku. Surprise, surprise, the dude still ended up getting first place in the entrance exam. So he gives the speech, and the first event would still be the basic one, which is just the race. And seeing as Izuku has the ability to blatantly just fly, he's able to very easily just get through the obstacle course and get first place, leading to the cavalry battle event happening, with Izuku actually having himself, as well as Araraka, Meihatsume, and Tokiyami in his team when it comes to the cavalry battle. Do I see this part of the story really changing that much? Not particularly. I mean, obviously he has Ki Blast, which he can use to knock other teams off of their thing. So this would kind of be something that keeps Bakugo and Todoroki at bay for, as long as he could possibly do it. But what Deku would pretty much do is he would be the one who pretty much carries the entire team on his back. We would have Meihatsume create use one of her babies to pretty much create like a saddle for all of them, and Izuku would carry all of them on his back, like they're all holding on to him, right? And Deku was just flying into the air, like shooting Ki Blast to keep people away. Like Bakugo would try to jump off of his people and like fly towards him, but he's not quite able to because Deku would just shoot Ki Blast, so he would like keep him at distance and just go even higher and higher. And Bakugo's trying his absolute best, but he just can't keep up with Deku at this portion. So he blatantly just has to back off away from Deku and just kind of make it so that Deku actually ends up getting the dub for this round. That said, we then cut into the 1v1s, and the first battle that we're going to be covering is Deku versus Shinso.